Hello everyone, my name is Spencer Walsh. Welcome to today's show. On the show, we have for you today the latest from the election, including New Times. Siena pulls out 4 points nationally in Trump with large leads in Florida and in Texas. And we have some takeaways for you from that from Nate Cohn that we can get to and just take a look at some of the broader polls as well. Also take a look at how inflation is infecting the election, specifically in Michigan. Israel sending more troops to Lebanon and general updates from the war there. And we will, we're going to break down a lot of key and very important kind of election stuff today for you as well. And we will get started with that right away, move right into it. So essentially, in entry piece, we get these polls out, plus for Kamala nationally, and plus 13 Trump in Florida, and plus, I believe it was like 6 or 7 Trump in Texas, Texas. So as a result, a lot of interesting stuff here, but Cohen here is really, I apologize if I'm calling him Nate Silver, just not my intention. Nate Cohn of the New York Times, talking about, he's interviewed 1,000 Floridians as part of the national polls, and Trump has really had a pretty considerable lead all along, and it's essentially saying this poll is not really an outlier. Man, I think he puts a point to this, and this is where I don't think this article is that good, because it essentially points to a thing that I think you could see in a lot of other ways, is that a lot of the social right-wing kind of extremism, wasn't very popular in a lot of parts of the country, except for Florida and New York, where they did really well, and they're still doing really well by sticking to that, really hardcore extreme, social extremism there, which I think, we can get into it a little bit later, but I really do worry about the fact that Kamala is just not calling that out and really playing to this very, centrist type of line, and some, really also pledging not to do anything different from Joe Biden, and just continuing to hew so close to Joe Biden, almost for fear of angering him on a personal level, which I think is really, really damaging. And then, the one thing she says when she does is that she's going to put in a Republican. We'll get to that in a moment. But anyway, the point is here, this kind of social extremism stuff, not very popular in a lot of these states, which I think is, pretty obvious, but it's popular in Florida. So, that's for Florida, which is already going to be red anyway. The reason why it's so red is because that kind of stuff is popular there. He also says there's this thing called weighting the vote, which is a technique, the recall vote, which is where pollsters ask respondents how they voted in the last election and then weigh the number of Biden 20 or Trump 20 voters to match the outcome of that election. In this case, pollsters would ensure that there are about 3 percentage points more Trump 20 voters than there were Biden 20 voters, because Trump has that national advantage. Trump won the state by 3 points in 2020. Many pollsters believe the technique might help them avoid underestimating Trump yet again. As I explained, there are a lot of challenges with this approach, but what happens if the makeup of the electorate changes? Over the past 4 years, Florida's party registration has shifted, going from D plus 0.7 to R plus 0.75. According to L2, a nonpartisan political data vendor, talks about how Florida is moving right, and saying this is probably not a Trump plus 3 electorate anymore. But as for, how that matters for other polls, it's an inherently imprecise measurement with this, plus 3 electorate adding that in. But it does make it hard to discount it based on the other polls. In the past, almost every poll would have had a chance to capture this kind of shift. In fact, that's the whole point of polling. Now, many polls are designed to ensure they don't show it at all. So I don't, maybe I'm missing something, but that's what, Cohen had to say on that, which I found to be pretty interesting. Look at the polls here in general and some of the swing state ratings, which are, you kind of toss up, Nebraska's second, probably going to be Democratic, but all these swing states right now, very, very close in terms of the most, 2024 polling. Harris up by less than 1 in Pennsylvania, Trump up by 1 in Georgia. North Carolina is Trump less than one, which is honestly pretty surprising. Like this Trump Georgia, this North Carolina Georgia dichotomy is something I continue to be fascinated with. We'll get to Michigan in a bit, but she's up by 2 there. Her best with Wisconsin. It's this Rust Belt combination, Rust Belt plus Nebraska's second. And by the way, Rust Belt is Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, plus Nebraska's second district singularly, because Nebraska counts their electoral votes individually. So by each congressional district has a single congressional vote. Maine does the same thing. But it's very important because that district is just going to be one little spot of blue that gets Kamala Harris over the line. I think 270 to 268, as close as you can get without a tie. So that would be, very, very close. But so Pennsylvania, another big state, she has to win there, up by less than 1. So it still seems like it is remarkably Kamala Harris coalition. And I think it's very interesting because she is really running essentially Biden's campaign with her face slapped on it. It really does feel like it. She's not doing a lot. The only difference she seems to be actually trying from Biden is essentially to say, I'm going to be more friendly to big business. I'm going to, we talked about how she's wooing Wall Street on the last show. That seems to be the main aspect of her difference from Biden. Not going to be on foreign policy, not going to be on really much of anything, as we saw today when she was on The View. And this is why, doing more interviews, I think for us as a population, it's good.
Well, if anything, would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
Well,
it seems like she was caught off guard and then almost took that question from the completely wrong mindset of just which Sunny Hostin was trying to go give her a chance to say is I respect President Biden. I was a part of these decisions, but I'm going to be different. I'm going to make a break. I'm the leader now. We need to win this election against Trump. Biden was unpopular. We need to make a break. Not say Biden was unpopular, but essentially that's what the motive would be. But she almost got defensive there and thought that Sunny Hostin, who was asking the question, was trying to give that kind of, classic VP shade of you weren't really in the room, when it happened or something like that. So I think that is very, I think that is a little just dishonest and just completely just not smart. And just it is such a, there's been report after report after report that showed just how popular Biden is. And sometimes there's been poll testing that's been done. I forget where I saw this, but I need to be, bookmarking things that I see more online. But it's really incredible because they'll ask the same policy position, but then mention that Biden supported it and it'll drop 10, 15 points. His figure and the fact that he was around in politics in the time, in the way that he was around, I think the fact that his age really did matter a lot, just makes him such a stain on her candidacy, and really makes a great opportunity for real change because you can break away, do something different, especially on one of the most unpopular issues, which is Israel. So, and if you keep, and this gets me to, by the way, all the shaming that is so endemic in all the liberal circles, being in a very liberal space like an American university, you get it so intensely of just you need to vote for, you want Trump to win? Are you kidding? It's again, with one of the biggest existential differences is between these two people is we're talking about immigration and we're talking about abortion, which has now kind of been, brought back up into the fore. And, now we're seeing, at least in some way, a filibuster for a pledge to break the filibuster for abortion, but we've seen them pledge to do that in the past, and try to push things through in the Senate in the past, and fail on that. But with immigration, which is one of the biggest things, is they have completely, essentially gone out and said to the American people, after saying this was Nazi shit for 6 years under Trump administration, in the first half of the Biden administration, now the Democratic move is, and Kamala is completely riding with this, and so is Tim Walz, is we tried to do that stuff that we said was Nazi shit 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, but they didn't even let us. They didn't even want to pass it because they're so hypocritical. It's just like, if you think that is fooling anybody, you have another thing coming. And it's just like that, especially with the Democratic base, because every little area, these decisions not being strong, not being kind of coherent, not actually reading the tea leaves and providing a very clear break that people, I think, clearly want from Joe Biden, is putting her in a situation where she's being hit from so many different angles with so many different constituencies, and for various different reasons. And it's just like it is really, really incredible to watch. And this is one example of it here with President Biden. Something you would have done differently with the President Biden in the past 4 years. Not a thing that comes to mind. And then what you said later is I'll tell you in just a moment what you said. So Kamala on The View was essentially asked, like, what are you going to do different from Biden? She says, not a thing. There's not a thing that comes to mind, which is, I feel like that is, I've literally been in an interview situation where a question catches me off guard. I'm just like, there's not a thing that comes to mind. And, you're that's what I say when I'm just like, I didn't give enough time to think about that as much as I would have wanted to think about it. And, she essentially says that. But then she's like, you know what? I'm going to come back. I'm going to circle back on this. What I would do that Biden didn't do, I would add a Republican to my cabinet. It's just like, you think that is what people want to, like, there's just been this ridiculous, country over party. Like, this stuff does not appeal to anyone. It's just like you're trying to get people to, the pro-war criminal caucus, essentially. You got Dick Cheney rolling out your endorsement, Liz Cheney following right behind, and you got supporting Israel up and down and, leading us headfirst into an all-out war again in the Middle East. And like, that is essentially where it's at. And you got this whole situation of that going on at the same time, where you have, them completely, and I think the VP debate really does show this, completely dropping the weird kind of messaging and essentially saying, oh, it's not a really big deal that, J.D. Vance, we'll disagree to agree on some things, agree to disagree, whatever. Like, this is the person that Tim Walz was out there just a month ago saying, this guy's playing weird. And it's just like, how far have we fallen? That this and all the stuff about William Walsh, it's just like you are trying all these different ways to demobilize your base. And I think, at least with the vibes, maybe not as much with the polls, although the polls have definitely kind of tightened up, marginally. They kind of went up a lot, and then, she was losing, or Biden was losing, and then she came in, she goes up, kind of plateaus, and now I think is beginning to kind of descend a little bit. But like that has got to be a very, very damaging situation for her, because she really is, I think, isolating so many parts of her base, kind of one by one through various different measures, almost in kind of a fractal like manner. I want to go to this piece now in the Financial Times talking about Bill DeJong, who's the owner of Alger Hardware and Rental just outside Grand Rapids in Michigan's Kent County, is not 100% there on whether to vote again for Donald Trump in November's presidential election. So we got small business owner kind of just outside of Grand Rapids. This is somebody who would be in, very much in the swing voter camp. Somebody who's been, he voted for Trump again. So at least in 2016, he voted for him. He pins the blame on Joe Biden's stimulus. So this is kind of a classic, he's not exactly a perfect example of somebody who switched in the kind of Trump era from being kind of a suburban Republican to a classic suburban Democrat, but he is pretty darn close. So like somebody fiscally, classically, socially liberal, and that, really that he doesn't like, the personality of Trump, and that kind of offends him, but he's also very economically conservative and probably in a lot of ways socially conservative. It's not, not a fan of personality, not a fan to deport immigrants. But in 2 decades in running the store, the 62-year-old has never seen prices rise like they did in recent years. He pins some blame on President Joe Biden's stimulus spending. Prior to COVID, if I had 10, it would really validate me, and I may be completely wrong on this, if we scroll down to this article, and he said, I voted for Trump in 2016, didn't vote for him in 2020, thinking about voting him again because prices are so high. And if he does, I think that would be very determinative of the election. So, if you turn on your TV, you can't avoid it. Like, I wish, it really, truly is got to be everywhere living in Michigan at a time. So, he said prior to COVID, I had to order 10 items in a week, and I would have to raise the price for. That was a lot. During COVID, it was 3 or 4 pages with 50 items each I had to raise the price for. Things aren't going up as fast anymore, but I don't think anything's coming down. Saying with just weeks left in the U.S. presidential race, undecided voters in industrial swing states are in the sights of Trump and Kamala Harris. The latest polls say Michigan put Michigan at 1.6 points above Trump. And right now, by the way, that Nebraska situation, actually, Nevada, she's up in Nevada, so she wouldn't need the win. But if she loses in Nevada, which is very possible, that would be quite problematic for her. So Harris' campaign is hoping that the economy will kind of help, but good news, positive news about the economy, including jobs, inflation, stuff like that will help. But Mary Palmer, who's a 63-year-old retiree from Boyne City, Michigan, said she was optimistic about the U.S. outlook and would vote for Harris. I'd be interested to see what her past job was. Ryan McVicker, a welder at a manufacturer, Bradford White in Middleville, in Michigan, of his grocery bills and electricity bills, is what he said about them. Republicans are probably better with money, he said, explaining his support for Trump. And that's, the kind of classic, even kind of conservative trope about the tax and spend liberals, which is even really backed up by reality. But it's not even something that, Democrats and Joe Biden are even making the case for and saying, we put this investment in, it's going to be reaping the rewards. And, coming out and actually defending that investment on the merits, I think, it would be something that could be incredibly more effective. I do like these kind of individual anecdotes. A chief executive of a manufacturer said, if we were firing on all cylinders, and then in January, it's like somebody flipped a switch. He blamed the downturn on a pullback in consumer demand and less business from the automotive industry, but he says orders are doing better again. People are, I think with the rates, had a big impact on everything going on with jobs, which I think is, outside of, to me, it's that's going to get processed, probably is something on Biden, but it's something that is kind of outside of Biden's control. And again, I think this is really a lot of these people, no matter what, they're going to be voting on the economy. You're talking about Michael Hyacinth, who opened up a Has Heart coffee shop in downtown Grand Rapids last year. Another kind of, person who could be someone who would vote for Trump in that kind of almost class position. You see, of course, race and, social background and other things come into it as well. But, you look at class, always it would play a role either subconsciously or, completely out there in the open. And I think you do see that with this, with the original guy that we talked about. And because it really did seem like, that person, it was really weighing Trump's personality or the economy. Like that I think that's probably when it comes down to it, it really is that simple. Because, Kamala is really trying not to distinguish herself. So the calculation that in the end that voters are making here is not going to be very different at all from the one that they had to make when Biden was in the race. Like I think the conclusion I'm coming to is that it's increasingly now, as the vibes have cooled off, it's increasingly, and she has gone out of her way not to distinguish herself from Biden since the convention. That is starting to set in for people, and they're saying, okay, I guess the same choice we made before. It's like the economy's doing good, Harris, Biden, Harris, whatever. The economy's not doing good. Harris, Biden, Harris, that kind of amalgamation, collaboration, as she's continuing to tie herself to Biden, would be it's kind of nicer, steadier hand, I guess, to in terms of presentation, in terms of managing it. but my pocketbook doesn't lie, and my prices, life was easier, prices were better under Trump. He had a better handle of the economy, all that stuff. COVID, pre-COVID, economy was really, really good, and now it's really, really bad. So I'm going to have to put that personality aside. Like, that's the choice that a lot of people, I think, are going to be making, and that seems to be what it is a referendum on for a lot of people in, kind of a lot of different, situations. Essentially saying, is this really the best both sides could do? Is the takeaway from DeJong, who was the first guy. Inflation jumped almost 10% in Michigan in 2022, and it was still 3% according to federal data in August. This has left housing-related expenses up 36% since Biden entered office. And that, if they really think that, the rent, the cost of goods for their small business, groceries, whatever, that will get down. I think a lot of people are going to hold their noses and vote for Trump pretty darn easily, even if they do find him, really quite disgusting. So that's definitely going to be something to watch over. And I think it really is quite clear now that, again, that calculation that voters are making across various different demographic groups, and their demographics will weigh how they make them. But the general calculation of this election for a lot of different groups of people is the same as it was pre-candidate switch on the Democratic side, which I think is a really, really remarkable thing and a real big indictment on Kamala, and also not surprising considering she has literally the same people running the damn campaign. All right, so now we move to our final story of the day, getting you caught up on all things to do with the Israeli military invasion as they deployed thousands of more troops in Lebanon and signaled a expanding ground offensive. And again, Financial Times, not perfect here against Hezbollah as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Again, when will it be called an invasion? Like, when they put in 10 units, 15 units, 50 units? Like, I would like to know. But they've said they had sent a fourth combat division into the troops, 20,000 troops in the freaking country, and it's not an invasion. Like, are you kidding me with this? Western media. It is really ridiculous. The country's military refuses to provide official figures or force estimates, but divisions are not expected to be at their maximum expected size of 10,000 apiece. Warplanes also pummeled targets in Beirut, southern Lebanon, and the Bekaa Valley, which all essentially in the south and central. Israel strikes have killed more than 2,000 people over the past 12 months, according to the Lebanese health ministry, and forced 1.2 million from their homes. Essentially, again, saying before Lebanon falls into an abyss of destruction and suffering like Gaza. That was how Netanyahu threatened the Lebanese people. In a defiant address earlier in the day, Hezbollah's deputy chief Naim Qassem vowed the militant group would fight on and replace Hassan Nasrallah, its long-standing leader, who was killed by an Israeli strike last month. I would like to reassure you our capabilities are intact, Qassem said, pointing to the Iran-backed group's attacks on Israel in recent days as evidence. This is a war of who cries out first, and we will not. It'll be interesting to see who blinks first, who screams first, who jumps out of the pot first. Essentially, is what that he's trying to say there. It is very interesting to see how he's talking about the diplomatic efforts. But what it comes down to with Hezbollah, and we know how interested Israel has been in the past in diplomacy, and especially now the hostages are essentially out of the picture at this point. They have not too much incentive from the population, and a lot of hate in the society for Hezbollah in Lebanon, and desire to keep pushing with the war, and let's be honest, support for Netanyahu. But they are essentially saying, and I think it is fair to say, that as long as their command and control structure is attacked, as long as they're able to protect their top guys from assassination, they will have, and as long as Israel didn't hit too much of their weapons, which they have a lot of weapons, they will have the dedication and the tools to continue this fight, which I think is probably a pretty fair estimation. But of course, I think it does remain to be seen in terms of their missile launching capabilities, how really they are affected. But again, something that's going to play a big role in the next days and weeks as the election looms. And if something really breaks out before then, how that will affect Americans going to the polls. Qassem said Hezbollah supported diplomatic efforts to broker a ceasefire, but throughout the past year, the group has repeatedly said it would only stop fighting Israel when a ceasefire was reached in Gaza. On Tuesday, the militant group fired one of the largest rocket barrages in the past year at northern Israel, despite the escalating ground and air offensive. The Israeli military said 85 Hezbollah rockets targeted Haifa and outlying areas in a single salvo, followed by a second of some 20 projectiles. Most were intercepted by air defenses or fell in open areas, although one person was lightly injured by a rocket shrapnel, according to authorities in Israel. So now they're essentially saying that in Arabic to beachgoers, the IDF is in Lebanon, that there will be IDF essentially invasions coming up the Lebanese coast to the Awali River, north of the city of Sidon. And a further move on Tuesday indicated a possible expansion of military action. The IDF declared 4 villages next to the Lebanese border in northwestern Israel as closed military zones. Israel took similar steps in the eastern and central regions of its frontier with Lebanon over the past 2 weeks before the launch of ground incursions. 60,000 Israelis in the north have been forced to relocate, and it's almost, a third of the country, I think, that has been for Lebanon at this time. It has been really, really quite serious. Safieddine, who took over the leadership after the assassination, this is of... I don't know. So they had a leader, Naim Qassem, who was a spokesperson, deputy chief Naim Qassem, and they said, Israel is saying now they killed apparently Hashem Safieddine in a recent airstrike in Beirut. He took over leadership of the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah. Hezbollah initiated fire against Israel after the Hamas assault. So that's definitely going to be something to keep a real eye on as the Gaza deaths are approaching 42,000. We take essentially a broader look here at the region, and it is quite a disturbing picture. We are looking at Lebanese state-run media reporting massive destruction over Israeli airstrikes as they continue to make good on that threat to turn it into Gaza, specifically in the southern Beirut suburb of Dahia. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has warned that Lebanon could face destruction like Gaza. And meanwhile, in Gaza, they have ordered Kamal Adwan, the Indonesian and the Al-Auda hospitals in northern Gaza to evacuate patients and health personnel within 24 hours. So, yeah, I think it's a lot of good updates and reports from this. But a piece I wanted to kind of close out on here from Ali Harb in D.C., who is reporting for Al Jazeera, essentially asking a question: is the Biden administration seeking de-escalation or driving Middle East war? If you remember, he declared back in February that a Gaza ceasefire was so close that it could materialize within days. More than 7 months later, not only has Israel's war in Gaza continued, but it's expanded with Israeli troops invading and bombing Lebanon as tensions boil over. As the conflict in Gaza intensifies, we've seen them continually, verbally call for de-escalation or ceasing with the fire, while literally providing the fire, supporting Israel in all their escalatory steps with Iran and Lebanon as well. And it really is, the question worth asking. So is the Biden administration simply failing to rein in Israel, as many liberal commentators have suggested, or is it actually responsible for the escalation, exploiting the chaos to advance a hawkish agenda against Iran, Hamas, and Hezbollah? And again, that is the bottom line, the common shared interest. And I think it is very, very important. And this is why it's such a great takeaway from this Al Jazeera article that I saw, really just before we kind of started the show, and I threw it on there, because it is validating, because I feel like I've been saying it for a long time on this show, saying it back in February, and being consistent, unlike Joe Biden. Like, this is the game that he is playing. And I think putting it in the perspective of not only just, I'm saying this to appease my home population is going to be pissed about this. Like, I have to kind of come out, verbally condemn you the same way that Netanyahu has to, in a kind of almost, hellish mirror, come out and stick his thumb in the eye of the Americans for the benefit of his own Israeli kind of right-wing populace and his right-wing base of support. They're both doing that to keep their respective bases happy, to work together because, they know they need each other to advance their goals and take out their common enemies, which would be Iran and all of their kind of networks around them, and also the Palestinians. In that way, Israel has that extra interest, which the U.S. is more than happy to overlook, which happens to be just the genocide of entire people in an effort to exploit that aim. And that is a policy that's been endorsed, by everybody from Donald Trump to Kamala Harris. And by the way, all the people that endorsed her and vote for her and support for her for president. Because again, as much as we see, if you claim the same logic that I hear from so many people out there on the liberal side of the real diehard Democratic stance, it's like, if you're voting for somebody who is by all accounts going to continue this genocide, you are literally, by definition, you're voting for the genocide. You are voting for the genocide. So if you vote for Kamala Harris, you're continuing the genocide because that's what it does. And if you're voting for Donald Trump, you're continuing the genocide because that's what it does. So don't try. And again, what is it? Does it suck to get accused of something that you don't support just because of one of the consequences of your vote, that in your intention of voting the way you want to vote is outweighed by other implications? If that's the case for you, then that sucks. But, that is the reality of the system that we live under, and the system that's been put forth by the kind of Democratic mainstream, essentially, that if you vote for a candidate and the candidate being elected means that, in the same way that, or you don't vote for a candidate and your decision in the voting booth, indirectly leads to another outcome. For example, I'm not voting for Trump if I vote for, Jill Stein, or I write in Joe Biden or something like that, but I will still get a billion people telling me that I'm voting for Trump. And if that's the logic that you apply, if you vote for Kamala Harris, you are pro-genocide. Like, that is, you are pro everything that's happening in Gaza, to the extent that Kamala Harris is pro everything that's happening in Gaza, because that is what you're voting for. And that is the final message, I guess, of the show. So hopefully it was informative. Hopefully I brought a lot of things together today, as I tried to do. It felt like I did that, but hopefully I was able to. Give me feedback at swrn702@gmail.com, by the way. Or consider joining the Supporters Club for $4 a month for ad-free episodes. But definitely come back for our next episode on Thursday. Thanks.